one. Welcome back, YouTubers. This is Inland Northwest Native News. I'm your host, Jeff Ferguson.
And I'm your co-host, Margo Hill. You know, Jeff, we just got through the holidays. I hope you had a good Christmas. I hope you guys all out there had a good Christmas. And a lot of our Native folks celebrate solstice. So a shout out to the Washulas and Stenskars. You know, they celebrate a winter solstice where all their families make gifts for each other. So to Barb and Danielle and, of course, Martina, happy winter solstice.
All right. Happy solstice. So if this is your first time joining us, we'd like to thank you. We'd like to say lem lemch. Thank you for tuning in. We'd also like to announce that we're almost to our 400 subscriber mark. We've picked up 80 new subscribers since we started doing our morning show. So we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'd also like to do a quick shout out to our newest subscriber. This is Wild Idaho Rising. So we wanted to say thank you for tuning in. Here at Inland Northwest Native News, we cover news and events for 11 tribes of the Inland Northwest, as far east as the Blackfeet in Montana, up north to the Kootenai of Idaho, the Kalispell, down south to the Umatilla, the Warm Springs, over to the Yakimas, as far west as the Colvilles, the Spokanes, Coeur d'Alenes. Who else are we missing?
I think you got Nez Perce.
Salish
yeah. Kootenai, I think you got them all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Salish Kootenai. Can't forget those guys. So yeah. We are taking and trying to fill the big black hole in media that mainstream media has just neglected for decades. You know, we're trying to update news and events locally, regionally, and nationally that are important to the Indigenous people of the Inland Northwest. And we'd like to thank you for being here, because it is about you. It's not about us. It's about you and sharing your news and getting your stories out there. If you have any questions or comments, we'd like to invite you to put them in the comment section. We'll be monitoring our live feed blog here. If you have any things that you'd like any comments you'd like to make to us live, we'd like to invite you to do that. So
we join you to invite us to join us live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to 8:30. We're discussing current and ongoing issues in Indian country. You know, the holidays were here, but things don't stop happening in Indian country. So we got up early this Monday morning, even though we're on break, to share with you some of the stories that we think are important for Indian country.
Yeah, and so one of the stories, we actually had a few stories, things that happened over the weekend or over the holiday. We had a stimulus bill that was passed just recently, and we're going to go over some of the effects to Indian country, what this means. And we've had an extension. That's part of what we're going to be talking about. But we had an extension to some of the relief money that was distributed to Indian country, and we're going to go over some of the things that were mentioned in a recent release. We also found out that there was going to be an extension to the unemployment for people. We ended up missing one. I know that there was a delay in getting that done, but there was also some good news coming out of that. $600. So they're supposed to go back in and negotiate to see if they can get that bumped up to $2,000. But we'll wait to see and before we report on that. So we did hear one kind of a sad story I want to talk about real quickly. This is a story that is national. This one came out on a dozen different news organizations. This one I just happened to pick up from NPR, and this is Hank Adams, the most important Indian dies at age 77.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about Hank Adams. You know, we stand on the shoulders of some great warriors of Indian country, you know, all across the United States, and particularly right here in the Northwest, we had Native folks fighting for our rights. So since the mid-1800s, the United States have entered into treaties with tribes across the Northwest, and there were folks that have been fighting for our rights under those treaties. Some of the language in the treaties reserved rights for tribes to fish in our usual and accustomed areas, and in common with citizens of the territory. So Native Americans, particularly on the west side, but throughout the inland Northwest as well, have been fighting for their fishing rights. And it was guys like Hank Adams, who's a Assiniboine Sioux, stood on the banks, along with a lot of other natives, really to fight for the fishing rights. So we call out and remember Hank Adams as one of those great Indian warriors who protested the taking of our fishing rights during the 1960s and the 1970s in the Pacific Northwest Fish Wars. Sorry about that. Hank Adams, he had been shot and he'd been jailed for protesting. He was a close advisor to tribes in the Northwest. But we really raise our hands to Hank Adams because it was men like him that brought the argument, and they led to the Bolt decision, which really secured fishing rights in the inland Northwest.
So this article is a really good one. If you get a chance to read it, we'll leave the links in the description below. We're going to be leaving the links to all the descriptions, everything we talk about in the description below. So be sure to check that out. This article, I did want to mention, it goes on to state that Adams was active in the American Indian movement. American Indian movement? A grassroots movement focused on addressing systematic issues of poverty and inequality for Native Americans. He joined the group Trail of Broken Treaties, the march they did across the country in 1972. The protest ended with participants occupying the Bureau of Indian Affairs offices in Washington, D.C. He helped resolve that occupation, as well as one involving hundreds of people at Wounded Knee a year later. During negotiations over the occupation of the BIA, Adams drafted the 20 Points, a statement viewed as essential in the history of treaties, according to the Museum of American Indian. Until his death, he continued to advocate for Native young people's education on treaty rights and for their participation in their community affairs. So he did all sorts of different things. He worked on the fish wars, like you talked about. He marched out to Washington, D.C., and then was involved at the standoff at Wounded Knee. So here's a guy that has been doing all sorts of cool stuff in Indian country, and he just passed at 77. And so I want to raise my hands and say, guys like that, they're will definitely be missed.
Yeah, we just want to take a moment and recognize, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Billy Frank right here in Washington State, was at Wounded Knee, and continued to advocate throughout Indian country.
Yeah, so just wanted to mention that, some of the guys like that they're not a dime a dozen. And so we want to recognize the efforts of and it's because of guys like that we have things like the treaties that were signed, and rights, fishing rights, hunting rights. They're working on stuff like that, right? Now with the Distel settlement up in Canada. But it's things like that have generational impact, so pretty important.
So let's jump right into a few of our stories. Jeff, we talked a little bit about this last week, but there are 70% of the Airway Heights prison inmates that are testing positive for COVID. This is a story that ran in the Spokesman, talking about the inmate population. Airway Heights is one of a dozen state prisons, but here at Airway Heights, they had a third of all cases among Washington state prisoners. So, when we see these kind of decaying conditions, we have some brothers out there at Airway Heights Penitentiary. The conditions had gotten so bad, they were holding the sick prisoners in the gymnasium. Governor Jay Inslee had a news conference last week talking about releasing some of the prisoners. They released some in April. We have Columbia Legal Services that's getting involved because the conditions are just getting so bad. So back in April, they did order 1,000 prisoners released. Of course, Airway Heights is a little bit more low security. It's not the dangerous felons. But there hasn't been any more large releases. But we see this is a real serious problem for any of our brothers that are incarcerated at Airway Heights.
Yeah, it's really big. You know, one of the things that caught me, the statistics in this were just alarming. I kind of was just briefly looking over this, but if you look at the statistics on it, just to go over these quickly, gosh, I couldn't even begin to understand this. They said that, let's see if I can find this. I'm going to try and read right off the monitor. It says since they started in a month, we had November 20th, there were 3 cases. And in a month later, December, I think it says 23rd, there's 1,341 cases with 5 deaths so far. That's crazy. There's been over 3,700, almost 3,800 cases. That's just crazy. Those statistics are astonishing. We can't begin to imagine what it's like in there. I know in this article it goes on to talk about, there's an inmate there, Tobin Sather. He describes decaying conditions. It says in the gymnasium where the sick were housed, 145 positive men shared 4 toilets, according to the Department of Corrections. Sather, one of the sickest men in a COVID-19 care unit at the prison, described showering twice in 15 days. Twice. And that's only once. That's not even once a week. That's just a hair under once a week. Medical treatment limited to acetaminophen and broken toilets, causing hours-long waits to relieve himself. He called the situation obscene. Since then, he and his medical care is degraded. No acetaminophen, no checks on his vitals. It's just crazy, and it's not getting better. We need to do something about this. This is a story that aired on Christmas Eve. Yeah, December 24th in the Spokesman Review. It's not getting any better. And, unfortunately, Native Americans are incarcerated at a higher rate than non-natives, and actually in Spokane County than any other ethnicity.
Right. We've reported on that before, Jeff, that we have higher rates of incarceration, that the judges set higher bail amounts. They have higher sentencing. We think about our brown brothers that are, behind bars during these holiday times. We all make mistakes. Who are we to judge anybody? We just hope that there's at least safe conditions for them.
Yeah, nobody out there in minimum security or sentenced to they didn't receive life sentences. They're out there in a minimum security facility. So we'll send our prayers out for them. They need help. They need our people in power to do something. And
a shout out to Columbia Legal Services. They've been serving Indian country for a lot of years, for folks that are indigent or don't have money. Columbia Legal Services have really taken care of us. So Jeff, you had another story about COVID.
Yeah, I do have another story about COVID. And one of the things I was trying to do, I pushed off doing more and more episodes at the beginning of the pandemic, mainly because I didn't want this show to be all things pandemic. There are so many things out there that have to do with this pandemic. You see it every day in the news. Over 330,000 deaths now nationwide. It's crazy, but it's hard to avoid, and it impacts us. It's impacting us all over. And so one of the things I think I mentioned in one of the earlier episodes is that I was afraid of not necessarily getting the COVID, but it was more of the long-term impacts. Mm-hmm. I heard that some people weren't recovering, and so they ran this story in the Spokesman Review. This was a little bit older, but I just noticed it, and I apologize, I missed this. When COVID doesn't go away, some survivors experience symptoms months after the infection. This is about Josephine Keefe. Now, Josephine, she is the president or the chair of the One Heart Native American Arts and Film Festival. She's also an adjunct professor at Gonzaga University. She teaches drama over there. She's a local producer and director of performing arts, and she's an accomplished actress. And so this article, it's a very extensive article. I'm not going to go and read the whole thing. I'm just going to highlight a few things that are in here. The opening paragraph, I am going to read this to kind of set the scene. Josephine Keefe's initial fight with COVID-19 was the sickest she'd ever been. Daytime fatigue turned into hours of sleeping. Nights were plagued with insomnia. Her loss of smell became so bad that standing over a pan of frying bacon could not change it, and she lost her appetite and her digestive system became fickle. One night she could not stop vomiting. One evening, Josephine's father carried her down the stairs and into her partner's car bound for the hospital. So she received a full body CT scan, IV drip, and oxygen, and she's really worried about infecting her father and her kids. It goes on to talk about how not only was it the smell and the headaches, it was a combination of different things. She says in here that she has a hard time with brain fog. She began to experience brain fog, short-term memory loss, and struggled to focus. So 5 months after her initial diagnosis, Keefe continues to experience symptoms that affect her day-to-day life. The brain fog is most debilitating, she said, especially as an actor, when memorizing lines, rundowns, and the like are vital to success. She is a director. She's supposed to be directing a springtime show at Gonzaga, and she's not sure she's going to be able to do that. She says, I can't say that I feel like myself, and it's at the point where I'm concerned or worried about when my brain and memory and my focus will start to feel normal again. So she's having a hard time. She talks about being in Zoom meetings. She says, it can be mortifying when my brain goes to sleep for a second and I have to reconnect to the people I'm articulating my thoughts to and do my best. So even in a Zoom meeting, when she says her brain goes to sleep, I couldn't imagine that. And this is months. This is 5 months into this for her. This article also goes on to talk about another person who, so this type of thing is also affecting people and can affect them while they're driving. But the article goes on to talk about a guy who has been experiencing so he was diagnosed early on. I think it was back in March. But every month since then, for 2 days, he's experiencing symptoms from the flu. So every month, he says, like clockwork, he's getting 2 days of the flu. And it's like, we don't know how long this is going to happen. We don't know how long this is going to continue. And we don't know the long-term effects. There's, all sorts of things out there that we are not familiar with in this. So it's so important. It's not just, I know there are a lot of people that recover. They recover 100%. We have family and friends that recover 100%, but we also have family and friends that aren't recovering and some that don't make it at all. And it's, it goes back to washing your hands. There's a vaccine out now, a couple of them, but, that doesn't mean, these vaccines are two-part. Just because you get the first part doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get a second part. We've had disruptions in the supply line. We've had delays in distribution. We've had delays in developing the vaccine. Again, we don't even know the long-term effects of the vaccines. So there's all sorts of different things out there. It's really kind of crazy. I have a video here I'm going to play, but I'm sure you have some commentary on what's going on.
Just, we've been working really hard across Indian country. Our tribal council, our tribal leaders, our nurses, our doctors have been working really hard across Indian country to keep us safe, to get these vaccinations out to our tribal communities. They're starting to serve the 75 and older, in some cases even the 50 and older. We have folks that are working hard. One of my friends, Nurse Jamie Abrahamson, she sent us a video, and so we're going to share that video. And we encourage you, if you send us the stories like Joey Cohen, if you send us the videos like Jamie Abrahamson, we'll get them on the air. We want to cover news that's important to you. Just a shout out again to our healthcare workers that are working so hard. They expose themselves to the virus, but now they're working double time to get the vaccine out there. You know, some folks have experienced little symptoms, like they didn't even know they had the virus, while others are, as you mentioned and reported, Jeff, that are really suffering serious consequences.
Yeah, I know we've lost a handful of elders through the inland Northwest already, and we're supposed to be getting spikes from Christmas travel and then again from New Year's.
And on that, you know, on that note, we shout out to the patriarch of the Reuben family. He passed away. Another tribal elder passed away just a few short days ago, and so we think of the Reubens today.
Yeah. Okay.
Nez Perce, our Nimipu brothers and sisters.
All right. So we have this short video. It's only 2 minutes, and it describes what mRNA vaccines are. So we thought this might be informative for you. So we'll see if I can get this going on here. That wasn't so bad. I do apologize for not having the audio. Still working on the technicalities of this switcher. Still kind of a rookie. Haven't used it quite as much as I'd like to, but we're getting there. Anyhow, that was talking about the mRNA vaccines. It's just kind of short and sweet, and thought that might be something that our viewers would like.
So we'd like to report, you know, one of our own, Ernie Rasmussen. He's Menominee, but married into the Spokane tribe. Works at Department of Commerce. He's one of our graduates of Urban Regional Planning at EWU, and he's working at the Department of Commerce. He's been working on broadband and working on tribal issues across the region. He just recently sent us and tribal leaders out a update from NCAI. So Jeff, you want to tell us a little bit about the NCAI report, the update on the Coronavirus Relief Fund?
Sure. So let's get us a Coronavirus Relief slide. So this is off of the desk of Ernie Rasmussen, Tribal Liaison, the Director's Office from the Washington State Department of Commerce. Reads, "Good morning, all. NCAI provided the attached summary for distribution. Please share the NCAI attachment widely to guard against overlooked resources and missed opportunities to meet the impacts of COVID-19 on tribal communities and urban Indian populations. Feel free to share the email summary below widely. Perhaps more importantly, Coronavirus Relief Fund, the CRF, the deadline of CARES Act CRF fund is extended until December 31st, 2021. This extension does not provide additional funds nor any flexibility in existing use of funds." This is huge, though, because there were tribes all over the place running out of time trying to implement all and spend all the money that they were given. And so some of the things that they were talking about, the NCAI summary offers a high-level overview of relief for sectors including the tribal fisheries, disaster assistance, rental assistance, education, higher education relief fund, transportation, nutrition. It also goes on to talk about here in Washington State. There's a big, I think I have oh, that's a different one. There's a big, yeah, I'm gonna go into this one.
So it's a big deal that the funds have been extended. They put a lot of pressure on tribes. If these funds go out, it's really hard to spend them in such a quick turnaround. We're trying to make sure that every expense is allowable. We're being very selective. Folks have to fill out forms to qualify for the funding.
It's kind of a big deal. We have tribes that were trying to get vital things like the broadband internet done, and they were running out of time. We had contractors that were being swamped that went from not having any business because of COVID to getting slammed because getting an influx of all this funding for all these different programs. So they went from not being busy to being slammed, and they just couldn't get it done by the end of the year. So to see that extension to December 31st, that's exciting. We here in Washington State, Washington State is, if you collectively, the Washington State tribes are the 8th largest employer in Washington State. So this means extensions of emergency unemployment relief for governmental entities. It means extensions for credits for paid sick leave and family, retention tax credits, broadband connectivity grants, creation of minority broadband initiatives, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's a large article. We're just briefly going to touch on that. But we did want to mention that because it's important. Tribes are getting kind of in a panic mode until they announce this, and so that's exciting news. Very.
Yeah, tribes were looking at having to give the money back to Treasury before really being able to provide some of those services. We have families still on the reservation that do not have internet. In our rural locations, we don't have access to phones. The phone lines just don't happen. And so all these things that we take for granted here in the city, it just doesn't happen in our tribal communities. And the biggest thing, of course, is the education, the digital divide for our kids. That's a tough one. But Jeff, I'm going to move right along because we're getting short on time. So I wanted to report the out of the Shoshone-Bannock, we are the same as the Salmon, a story of suffering and perseverance. For 30 years, the Shoshone-Bannock have led the effort to save the Snake River sockeye salmon from extinction. And they are still fighting that fight for the fish along with their own survival. So Dr. Sammy Matsaw and other members of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes have this ancient agreement they made with the starving ancestors and the fish who saved them. This is a guiding principle for our tribal people. The salmon are here to take care of us, so it is our obligation to take care of them. So the salmon really is part of our knowledge system. And Matsaw, who's actually Oglala Lakota, is a tribal research biologist, and he's focused on the Chinook salmon and the steelhead. They, as he says, they are our Socrates, our Aristotle, our Plato. They are teaching us today. So we are trying to make sure that they don't go extinct. And it's just heartbreaking, the animals and the fish. It's a whole people and a culture. So we are trying to save our salmon people, and the fish's resilience is really the people's resilience. So we wanted to give a shout out to our Shoshone-Bannock brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and they've been doing some really exciting things down there. One of the things they do is they take families out on the river to show them and to give them appreciation. Here's the doctor with his family going out on the river, but they wanted to include the native youth, And it's so vital. It's not just there, but around here too. This is some of the statistics from this article, real quickly. Today, just 1% of most of the populations return home to spawn. 1 to 2%. 1 to 2%. The river was once one of the most prolific salmon habitats in the world, with millions of wild salmon and steelhead returning to spawn there every year and providing the main nutrition source for the area's indigenous people for thousands of years. It goes on to say that these fish travel nearly 1,000 miles and up 6,000 feet in elevation. And at their height, more than 100,000 sockeye salmon would return every year, and these days, returns barely break double digits. Barely break double digits. That's like 10 or 20 compared to 100,000. So it's not just around here. It's down Chauvin Way. It's all over. We need to do what we can to save our salmon because they're so vitally important. So
yeah, Jeff, we've been down with Julian at the Nez Perce. We've been down on Free the Snake at the flotilla with our environmentalists and all our tribes down there, trying to, there's some dams down there that aren't bringing in much electricity, and the habitat is really ripe to bring those salmon back. And so I think that's some of our best chances in the Pacific Northwest. So shout out to our Shoshombanics, Sherwin Racehorse, if you're watching, and Verna Racehorse, one of the nurses that are fighting this pandemic. We're trying to save Indian people and our salmon. And so shout out to Ione Yellowjohn is also Shoshombanic. So we wanted to report on that story.
Yeah, so we are just about out of time. There's one last story I want to run. This came out of the Seattle Times, Pictures of the Year. More images than ever for a year. That was more of everything. And this is I just wanted to run down this one real quick. Not going to go over every image. This is Indigenous activist Roxanne White. The article goes on to say that she is a force. You can feel it in her presence. She has led countless marches in person and rallied support for families online for missing and murdered Indigenous people, the MMIP, in Washington State and beyond. White is an enrolled citizen of the Nez Perce tribe who was born and raised on the Yakima Nation reservation. She was selected as one of the faces for a campaign around land stewardship for Indigenous Peoples Day by nonprofit Amplifier, Neotero, and Illuminatives. For the mural, she was painted by Vermont artist Limnapi, based on a photograph by Brandy Paisano of Seattle. White texted me the afternoon she was going down to the mural, and I ran out to meet her. I'm proud we ran it on page 1 on Election Day. This was by Bettina Henson. Want to show you just kind of a closer up, but it was really kind of a neat thing. Man, that's a neat portrait.
It's beautiful.
That's a neat portrait, a neat mural. And we just wanted to say quick shout out to Roxanne White for all your wonderful work in Indian country. We appreciate it. We raise our hands to you. Thank you so much. So we'll again leave links to everything here in the description section, comment section below.
And Jeff, before we wrap up, I just want to wish happy birthday to Bob Turner, the San Poel clan, Anna Eaglebear, William Stensgar. We covered his hip hop rap in the One Heart Film Festival, and then also our good buddy, my cousin, and your good buddy Ryan Abe. So shout happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday out there to Ryan Abe, our own little filmmaker.
All right, we'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you once again for joining us.